Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Sharaad Kuttan. With me, Idhan Zakaria, CEO of the Centre, and Terence Gomez, Professor of Political Economy at University of Malaya. We're talking about the Shared Prosperity Vision 2030 document. There's a lot in it, and I know a lot of it's controversial. Terence, Bumiputera equity, again, has come up as a way of measuring shared prosperity. Is this the right yardstick?
I think it's about time the country moved away from any discussion about that 30% figure. It's really outdated. But since they brought it up and they put it back on the table, we have no choice but to discuss it. But let's look at this from a historical perspective. When they introduced the NEP, the equity, I have the figures here before me. This is very important. In 1970, the volume of equity owned by Bumiputera and trust agencies was only 2.4%. It went up during the NEP period at the end of 1990 to 19.2%, and it continued to rise to about 22%, we were told, in the year 2011. Since then, according to this document, it has fallen behind and has fallen appreciably. And so they are saying now we got to do something about this. But I'd like to put this back on the table. Let's look at the non-Bumiputera segment. The non-Bumiputeras owned in 1970 27%. It went up to the high point, 45% in 1990, and now we are told it's down to about 34% and falling. That means even for non-Bumiputeras, they're falling behind. Just as the Bumiputeras have fallen behind, the non-Bumiputeras have fallen behind. And this is very troublesome, because what does it mean in terms of domestic investors investing in the economy? They're not investing, which is why they're also falling behind.
So they're falling behind to whom? I mean, who's taking the lion's share of the economy? They're always in control of it or has ownership of it? Very
good point, because what is on the ascendancy is foreign firms. And again, we go back in history. According to the figures, the tables clearly indicate in 1970, foreigners own 63.4% of the corporate sector. Now it reached its lowest point in 1990, 25%. And since then, it has been rising steadily. And today we are told it's about 40%, 45% in fact. It's reaching 50% of the economy. Now I'm worried, and I just want to close on this point. Who are these foreigners also are coming in? What I looked for in the document, which I felt we had to put on the table too, is the role of China. China is the key new player in the economy, and Chinese investments are coming. That's our current research. They're also coming in a big way. How does China's coming in and these foreign investors coming in through state-owned enterprises from China fit into this framework that we are talking about?
Okay. One of the things that we've come to accept about Malaysia is democratic, or at least it had the form of it, and perhaps now we're going to give it some substance since the elections of last year. But we're also a capitalist economy, and one that's fairly globalized and fairly open. Is it a problem that so much of the economy is owned or controlled by foreign business and corporate interests? I mean, is ownership and the identity of the owners really what we should be looking at, or rather the nature of the kind of investments we're getting, and the nature, are they building a strong economy? Are they creating resilience? Is there complexity? Are they creating jobs? Idhan, what do you think?
I think the question that I would perhaps put out is, who are these foreign investors? Are they foreign corporations, or are they foreign state investors? For example, China, as Terence pointed out, they are doing this in a big way everywhere. For example, they go to Africa, for example, and say, if you let us, you get your oil in Angola, for example, we will build you your railroads, etc., etc. That is a state type of investment. It's not a corporate body from, this is not a PLC from the UK deciding to invest 25% in Malaysia. So I think there needs to be a clarity on who is actually investing. Is it a state investment? In which case, I'd probably be quite wary of that. If it's normal corporate investment, I would probably be saying that might be a little bit more healthy in terms of how people see our economy.
Right, so because state investors might come with other strategic interests, is that what you're...
Other strategic interests, other perhaps potential motives or new forms of colonization that...
Oh my God, the neo-colonialism. Okay, but Terence, I mean, really, should we be concerned about the identity of, of the money that comes that it invests? I mean, as opposed to, as I suggested, what they actually, the consequence of that investment?
I'd like to take this point further. When China comes in, they're driven primarily by state-owned enterprises. Malaysia's economy also has got a lot of GLCs, which are also key players in the economy. Here we must look at the role of the state. Two government leaders can talk to each other, and the Malaysian government, I would have thought, would play a clear role in dictating also the terms of entry here. So for example, if we have more joint ventures, if there's a clear stress on transfer of technology through these joint ventures, it can be productive for both sides, I would argue. So our Malaysian firms also can learn from this joint venture, and they have good technology which they can transfer to us. Look at the case of Geely and what they've done with Proton. They can help the economy grow. But we have to be very clear that when we allow these foreign investors to come in, domestic investors or domestic firms must also be part of this process. That's what I was concerned about. I don't see enough of that happening.
But what kind of, I mean, honestly, what kind of leverage does Malaysia have? They're regional competitors. Many other countries in the region willing to accept Chinese money, perhaps lowering barriers to entry and facilitating that. Does Malaysia really have a choice? Can it? Is it an equal negotiator at the table, Idhan? What do you think?
I mean, we've got to accept the fact that we are a small economy, but that doesn't mean we can't push back where we can. Again, there are limitations to what we can do, and there's got to be something in it for us as a country, and we've got to be aware of and this is about transparency, knowing from the get-go what is it that we are giving up and what is it that we are getting in return.
Terence, I mean, your final thoughts are on some of, so we talked about some of the issues around, the international challenges, but domestic structural problems, do you think this document addresses? I mean, are we honest about what needs to be done?
My primary concern is this: if it is supposed to be an inclusive document, does this document generate ideas that domestic investors, especially non-Bumiputeras, will say, I have faith in this government, I do believe it's inclusive, and I want to be part of this agenda that they have? I'm afraid I don't see it, because it's a repetition of old policies which bypass domestic firms. You said just now, what is our strength? I would argue we have a vibrant SME base. That is our strength. But we cannot have this situation of ethnic bypass through these kinds of discourses. The inclusiveness should have been how to incorporate them into this. We have a vendor development program. Can we bring them in with the FDI that's coming in? Those are the things that I want to see, but I'm not seeing it. The second issue, and we have to get into this also, but we don't have time on it, is education. Now, we may say education is in a bad state, but we have a vibrant middle class. We have a middle class which is well educated. This middle class can also be part of this process too. I didn't see any attempt to bring that middle class, that educated middle class, also into this process. Those are the key weaknesses I feel of this document.
Thank you so much, both of you, for being with me on the show. I've been speaking to Terence Gomez, who's a professor of political economy at University of Malaya, and Idhan Zakaria. She's with the Centre. That's all we have for you on Consider This tonight. I'm Sharaad Kuttan, only for Astro AWANI.